My soul is so dark. When you open up the refrigerator of my heart, there is no light.
We are talking today to the creator of something that is very, very much needed in the world of tabletop RPGs, and that is a system specifically designed for Victorian-era steampunk. And the way the system works is pretty unique too. We'll get into a lot of it later, but first let's introduce our guest here, Zeke Coughlin, creator of Clockwork Dominion. We were lucky enough to meet him at Gen Con and learn about his game. Zeke, take us away. Tell us about Clockwork Dominion.
Well, I mean, Clockwork Dominion came out of a dissatisfaction with a lot of role-playing games. The initiative system came out of disliking waiting around for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes before you do anything. And it's kind of, well, I mean, you make the game you want to play. And so we made a game with all the different elements that we wanted to see. We didn't set out to get rid of dice, but we quickly found out that getting rid of dice allowed us to do things that that we couldn't otherwise do. I wanted to have rapid conditions that changed the way that combat, social and physical, ran. Kind of like old school Rollmaster, that anything could happen and it was amazing, but that game required you to do 67 different charts to get to a result that took minutes. And that kind of ruined gameplay. And so we have conditions right on the cards.
There you go. Yeah, sorry.
So as things happen, you're not just doing points of damage to something, you're doing narrative effects. The initiative system is non-linear. And so it's a resource management system that allows for action and interaction, reaction, interrupt. And so you never quite know what's going to happen. And so we create this believable, unbelievable world by pulling in all of these elements that seem fantastical, but actually existed. And then we just proliferate them through the game world so that we're actually adding touches of fantasy, but not as much as you think. And you put all those things together and you get a game that plays fast. You get a game that feels like you're in narrative even when you're in combat, but it doesn't do it the way that a lot of games do, where you talk louder and you get to go first. It's very mechanical, very structured, but it still feels like a narrative. No one's waiting around. Everyone's always engaged at the table, whether it's combat or whether it's narrative. And then you throw that into the story that allows for a believable, unbelievable world. Well, we've had a bunch of people that review the game, and they started out by saying, oh my God, you can't get rid of dice. You can't get rid of dice, because everybody loves dice. I can't even tell you how many dice I own. My wife would like me to get rid of some of them. I own so many dice. But the cards allow for a different type of mechanic. I'm gonna show a card up here.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that there's a couple of different numbers on there. There's a 100 unique card deck, and the number in the top corner there on the left or right, depending on how this is flipped. You can see the top right, you have a number between 1 and 100. Creates percentile values, and it breaks all ties. The large number in the center is either positive or negative, which is basically how you create dice results. It's the randomizer for the game system. And it's also how you do initiative. And then you see the condition on the bottom. And that's really the thing the cards really allow us to do, is to insert those narrative effects. The cards also allow us to deal things out. So instead of getting an initiative number, the cards allow us to use resource management for initiative. So you get 3 cards, but you can be dealt up to 5 or 6, I think. Everyone discards down to 3, and those are your actions for the turn. It kind of zigzags around the table from highest to lowest, but when I play a card to act, someone else can flip a card to react, provided they're somehow related to the action. And now you have these little narrative vignettes that happen. You have this action reaction, so combat flows like a story. It's less like I'm running up and trying to hit something over and over and over again, and more like I'm attacking it, it's attacking me, and it creates this little mini story, just like what would happen in a movie or in a book. And then you can double flip cards, spend 2 resources rather than 1 to interrupt. And that allows for all of those things that happens in every movie or in any story where, you know, I got to jump in front of the bullet to save my paramour, or the evil villain is rushing off with my best friend, and you're in these moments in role-playing games, and it happens all the time. Or, you know, that pulling that idol off of that evil witch's altar is like the entire goal of my character, and I'm going to doodle because it's your turn. Will you please take care of that for me? And it's so frustrating, and it breaks story, and it pulls you right out of the game. And this initiative system allows for, provided that you didn't squander your resources, it allows for you to act when it's most narratively relevant for your character. So, I mean, our goal was to kind of start from scratch, break how people thought it could be done. I mean, when I told my friends, I'm going to develop an initiative system that's not round robin and does not involve screaming, they said, if it could have been done, it would have been done by now. Why are you even wasting your time? 47 iterations later, we got one that worked.
Well, I think the way you can tell it works is because we look at it coming in this from the outside and we're like, oh yeah, it's so simple.
Yeah.
Like, of course you do it this way. Like, it makes so much sense. I think that's interesting. I think that kind of leads to the other point, is the importance of social interaction and social standing and social relationships in this game, which obviously makes sense because this is Victorian era British Empire. Like, everything is about social classes. So I think this is a good moment to dive in a little bit to how social combat works.
Oh, sure. I can talk about social combat. Social combat works on a 5-tier spectrum. You basically have favorable, agreeable, indifferent, guarded, and hostile. When something happens, someone's trying to convince you, someone's trying to persuade you, you choose your own disposition on that track. That's nothing new. A lot of game systems use something similar to that. But most game systems are basically a one roll and done scenario. I change your disposition. Remember reaction checks back from like second ed AD&D? And it's basically, I'm changing the way roleplay moves forward, and that's really about the end of it. We wanted to make social combat as robust as physical combat, and make it something that felt meaty, that felt viscerally satisfying. And so it ends up, social combat lasts a little bit shorter than physical combat, but we've had players that usually do wandering murder hobo characters. And when they were introduced to a social combat system that felt viscerally satisfying, they're like, oh, I can totally play this high society Victorian guy that doesn't even get into combat because I have all of these options open to me that are actually engaging.
And it is really satisfying because, like, I mean, I've had that scenario. Jonathan probably knows exactly what I'm talking about, but I've had that scenario where I say something, I roll a 20, and it works, and we're all like, that never should have worked. It should not have been a thing. But then when I played in the game at Gen Con, I had a moment where I had to actually come up with something creative that worked. And based on my skills test, it worked. And it was much more satisfying in that moment because I had to creatively, like, actually come up with something that worked in the story, as opposed to just saying the first thing that spewed out of my mouth, rolling a 20, and then it works. Like, well, I had to actually think critically.
I think the thing that I like most about it is the way that social combat interacts with physical combat. Because, and Sarah can attest to this, I have times where, you know, it's like, okay, somebody did something, roll initiative. And I'm like, wait, I got one more thing to say.
He does that.
Does not matter because we're in initiative, and it's not just the Hobgoblin Lord. His turn doesn't come till the end of initiative. His minions have to go first, and so we've got to do at least one round of combat before we can even have this conversation.
Yeah.
Like, how can I be a socially based character and get us out of these situations? I can't. That's just not how D&D works. I get us out of different situations sometimes when I roll well. When we're in combat, we're in combat, you know? So like, how does that How does that kind of work together? And also, if you could touch on the guard system.
Because guard is your ability to protect yourself, it means that you don't just have to hit someone to have them move to block or rough someone up a little bit. You can distract someone with a social attack, and it can cause their guard to go down. You can intimidate someone to make them just a little afraid, to the point that their guard drops just a little bit. You know, humiliating someone so that they're so angry they're no longer paying attention to what they're doing. You can't wound someone in a physical combat with a social attack, but you can be a completely social character with absolutely no physical combat skills whatsoever and still be very effective in physical combat. You don't suffer from what we like to call bard syndrome. It makes it so that characters always have something to do. There's a full adventure completely written out called Idle Hands, available in the QSR, which is for free on our website and then also on drivethrurpg.com.
What's the best URL I can throw up right now to direct people to
ReliquaryGamestudios.com.
I
There's
wasn't
a bunch of content that is still in the process of being switched over. So if you go to our website and it's like Origins 2017, we're not abandoning our website. We're just having a little trouble with content.
Somebody wanted to buy the physical book right now, and a deck of cards, because that's all you need to play the game is the book and one deck of cards. Where is the best place to go to your website, or is there a better place to purchase through?
You can't buy the physical book from our website. The best place to get a book is to go to your local game store and tell them you want the book. If they distribute through Alliance, they can order it and it makes us look good. It kind of promotes us. And then if you really want to buy it online, there are a couple of sites that have it, like atomicempire.com sells our book. I don't remember any others off the top of our head. If you're interested in PDFs, all of them are available on drivethrurpg.com. You can get print-on-demand versions of the book there that are a little cheaper, but the print-on-demand versions for the core book are markedly different.
And guys, the book itself is worth the money. Let me tell you, the art is gorgeous. And aside from that, as we were telling Zeke before we started up here, we spent most of the drive from Indianapolis back to Chicago, no, further than Chicago, back after going to Gen Con, we spent most of the drive just reading out of the book. I was driving and Sarah was just reading it because the prose is beautiful. Like, this is just plain good writing. Tell us about the world of Clockwork Dominion. What is the Clockwork Dominion? What is the Clockwork?
So we wanted to build a game that helped game masters make players scared. So enter the Pontus. So the whole kind of cosmological root of the game world is when the divine clockmaker, which is kind of a Victorian take on the Abrahamic god. It's this deistic absentee god that comes in upon the world, but it's a formless void, and from this nothingness, which we call the Pontus, which is a Greek word that means ocean or under ocean. In our world, the Pontus is the primordial nothingness from which all things were made. The clockmaker takes the Pontus, builds it into the clockwork, which is his home for humanity, that turns according to his divine will to become whatever it is that he intended for us to be, intended us for us to live in, but we will never know because we broke it. We did terrible things to each other. You know, pick your mythos. Eve ate the apple, people murdered each other, you know, blah, 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 blah. Whatever, you know, you want to go with, we broke the divine will and we broke the clockwork, and now it is slowly falling and crumbling back down into the chaos from which it was made. The Pontus laps at the foundations of the world and seeps through the cracks into our reality, dismantling it and pulling apart the very fabric of what is real at the seams. And so this is how everything that ever happened in history that's crazy, that can't be explained, happened. People spontaneously combust, people disappear and reappear in random locations, monsters, it rains frogs or blood or fish. But the thing is when your characters do things that are terrible, when they murder people, which you really shouldn't do in this game, at least not without a whole lot of forethought. If you torture or break your oath, something that is disorderly, you can get corruption on your character sheet. There's a Doom card in the game.
I got it.
Thank you. When the Doom card hits the table, if your characters have corruption, the Pontus rises. Something terrible happens to the extent you've broken the clockwork around you and to all of your friends. While players are not afraid of scary, scary monsters, players are terrified of horrible, game-altering things that happen to them because of their own bad moral decisions that happen at a point in time in the future that they cannot prepare for because it is utterly random.
The last thing I definitely want to make sure we get to is talking about purpose. How does purpose come into mechanics?
So you have this whole order chaos thing going on in Clockwork, where it really talks about the Pontus represents chaos, the clockmaker's plan represented order in its creation, and now is whatever it is. You have this, we call it purpose and ether, and they're meta currency in the game, and they represent your balance in this order versus chaos. You are purposed for something in the clockwork. You also have free will to do whatever it is that you want to do. When you spend purpose, it's basically saying, whatever happened to me shouldn't have happened because it will deny me from fulfilling my true destiny. What I was designed to do is being thwarted, and the clockwork will turn in my favor to prevent this from occurring. So there are two ways that can be used. The first way is you can use it to undo consequences before they occur, before they're applied. And the second way is you can take temporary control of the narrative. You're basically literally taking control of the clockwork for a second so that it turns in your favor. Anything plausible, and there's very detailed of what it can be used for in the book. It talks about what is considered plausible. You can insert things into the narrative.
With that, I guess we'll say once again, thank you, Zeke, for joining us. Thanks, Sarah, for stopping by and jumping into the conversation. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Until next broadcast, which will likely be Sunday, when we play Marks of Mischief. You'll see us two there being our character selves. I have never got to say this before, but class dismissed.